Hey everyone, my name is Mark. I'm a doctor of physical therapy. Today we're going to talk about kind of a brief overview of the most important muscles to work out specifically as a snowboarder. Potentially in the future I can go into more of the skiers aspect, but being a snowboarder myself, I'm really going to dive in to see and tell you kind of the most important muscles that we can strengthen and work on just to get ready for this upcoming season. If this is your first time here, welcome. We are a mobility duo. My name is Mark. I'm a doctor of physical therapy with my wife. Credentials are in the description below if you are at all curious. We are health professionals and athletes working primarily with athletes, primarily those being snowboarder and ski athletes as well as the weekend warriors. So again, if this is your first time, welcome. Comment, subscribe, like below. So let's get started. Okay, so again, this is just going to be a brief overview. More videos in the future, we'll kind of dive in specifically. So how I want to get started with this is just maybe start from the bottom up. So initially, let's start at the ankles. Like I've talked about in the past, our legs are part of a kinetic chain. So all of our joints are essentially working together. So joints are affected by the knees, are affected by the hips, by the core, etc., and it goes back down. Ankles are very important. Sarah has talked about ankle mobility in the past. If you haven't seen that, go check it out. She talks about how we can improve that, but ankles are essentially controlled by a few different muscles surrounding in the bottom portion of our leg. So in the front we have our anterior tib, helps us dorsiflex or bring our ankle up. In the sides or the back we have posterior tib, it kind of helps us move our ankles in and out like such, and our gastroc, which attaches to our Achilles tendon, helps us move our foot down. So, and on the very sides we have our fibularis muscles, kind of helps us move our foot up to the side. So essentially what these muscles do, they kind of allow us and give us that proprioception, that ability to move forward and side to side, which is essentially very, very important with snowboarding and skiing, again, depending on the firmness of your boot. Okay, so continuing up the kinetic chain here, we're going to start on the muscles in the front of the legs. So you have a few different muscles here. We call these our quadriceps, which you've probably heard your quads. It's in the name, quads. There's more than one. The very important one is the rectus femoris because it crosses a couple of joint lines, attaches to your patella right there. The quads are specifically important because we are constantly in that squat position or we are jumping up if we're going off of a jump. So quads are constantly activated and they are vitally important to strengthen. With guys specifically, this isn't really too much of an issue because guys tend to be really, really heavy in those quads because obviously we see them at the beach, they're visible, and guys tend to be more, what's the right word? Uncomfortable? Is that the right word? I don't know. They tend to be more aware of those quads. So the important thing here is not the size of the quad. The important thing here is the endurance. So can you sustain a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes of constant load on that quadricep? So whether you're going in a concentric movement, going down, or eccentrically, so moving slowly, kind of those muscles moving backwards in a slow movement. So next kind of set of muscles I would say is the hip flexors. Again, guys, not too worried about this, but it can get inflamed sometimes. But your hip flexors, specifically your iliopsoas, kind of comes across, and it does come across the joint line. But again, it is important because as you are snowboarding, you're constantly, your hips are flexed in that flexed position. So it is important to keep those strong. Okay, and then moving on to the back side of our legs, I would say, because the gastroc or your the giant calf muscle on the back of your leg does cross the knee joint, it is important to maintain and keep that strong. The thing with snowboarding is because we are kind of stuck in a boot, we aren't really using it all too much, but because it still does cross that joint line, it is important that we still strengthen that. More importantly than that, though, is our hamstring groups. So we have another set of muscles in the back, specifically the hamstrings here. And those are also, I would say, in the top 3 of important muscles to strengthen, or probably at least 2 or 3. So hamstring groups, again, number of exercises that you can do with this, but it is constantly working. As you are coming down in that squat position, they are working concentrically and eccentrically to flex and extend that bottom leg. So, and then lastly, or one of the last ones I would say arguably is maybe the most important, is our glutes and external rotators, our hip muscles. So again, this tends to be more, females tend to focus more on our glutes just because it's what we see. But guys, this is a very important muscle to strengthen. And I would say, you can do common functional exercises. There's nothing specific. There are specific exercises that you can isolate your glutes, but your common squats, things like that are very, very important. But the glute muscle is arguably the most important muscle for, I would say, snowboarders, just because you are constantly in that kind of squat position, in and out of that. And the glute is really important with that extension, especially at that hip. And then deep inside of that, we have our hip abductors, so your hip, your glute med, your glute min, things like that, and a bunch of small external rotator muscles inside there. So you don't really need to get specific with those because large functional movements will kind of hit those. So yeah. And don't forget that, when you are going back and forth, front to side, things like that with a snowboard, yes, you are planted in with 2 feet with your boots, but essentially you are shifting that weight back and forth with your legs. So it is essential that we work our legs individually. So I'm a big proponent of kind of individual single leg movements. And again, I'll try to make some videos for you guys that are specific to snowboarding, but it's going to be very, very important that you're not only doing kind of closed chain, 2 feet on the ground movements, that you are isolating one leg at a time, because many times our legs will compensate for weaknesses in the other. So it's really important to isolate those and strengthen and make sure that we're even on both sides. Okay, lastly I would say is our core. Our core is vitally important, and I guess you could say it's top 3, top 4 in there, because especially with snowboarding or ski sport sports, we're using our core all the time. If we are turning, if we're catching small little edges here and there, our core is so important because it keeps us stable. It prevents injury, and isolating that core, and that includes your front and your back. And there are a couple different layers there. I can talk about that in the future as well. Essentially, snowboarders, we do use our arms. We use our arms for balance. We use our arms to catch ourselves if we fall. So while you may not think snowboarders use their arms like maybe a skier does with poles, essentially we do. So that's also important to work out. Specifically what those muscles are, I can dive in later on. Hopefully I gave you some of the muscles you can focus on and what they're doing across each joint, specifically our lower extremities or our legs, and as well as our core. But yeah, these are vitally important. Just as a reminder, we're not so much focused on the size of those muscles, more so of the endurance and quality of that muscle. And that single leg movement is super important, specifically with snowboarders, because we are shifting our weight back and forth. So if you like this, please subscribe, please like. If you have any questions about specific muscles and what they do with snowboarding specifically, comment below, let me know what you think. I'd love to answer any questions you guys have. Thank you for watching, and have an awesome day.